and we've built this home at Ainsley Terrace as a mid-century modern home. And that is an era that it was depicted around about 1960, where some of the old styles and symmetries of some of the earlier buildings was sort of thrown out a wee bit. Everything was streamlined and things were done differently. And so, for example, in this old home, we call it an old home because it's a style that is now 70 years old. And where they had leaning walls and tapered shapes and linear kind of aesthetics. And so we've styled it this way. And our designer did a great job of producing a home that to us initially looked a bit interesting. We had to take a second glance at it to really understand what he was trying to achieve. But Jared from AP, he did a great job, and he fitted it onto the site here well, and it gave us the amenities that we wanted. Really, it's just a home that's 160 square metres with the garage included. And that is about 125 square metres of home, which we believe is plenty for us. It has 3 bedrooms, one of which my mum comes and stays 4 times a year, and that's often the case nowadays. We build homes based on previous expectations and often based on what a real estate agent might have told us, that we need 4 bedrooms and we need big sizes. But really, when it all comes down to it, mum comes to stay 4 times a year. That room doesn't need to be elaborate. And when she comes, we love having her here, but she's not really worried about spending time in that room. So we were content to build a home that has compressed amenities, that has smaller things that really don't matter, but the things that do matter, we really wanted to make a big thing of. And that's what the Superhome movement has led us and refined our thinking around what essentially is the important part of the home. And so as we've progressed over these last 5 years and learned about energy efficiency, we've then come to realise that there are 5 or 6 key principles in building a home that's energy efficient. And back in 2020, this property came up at Ainsley, and it was a wilderness, and it reminded us of what we loved about the West Coast. And my 2 sons and Joe and I, we and their partners, we reached out as far as we could for what we could afford, and we managed to cobble together enough to buy this property, and then we split it up and shared it around, and we began building on it. This home we built last year and we finished it in October. The idea being that it was this old style mid-century home. We didn't have a big budget for it. We'd stretched ourselves a bit thin with the subdivision and the various other things going on, and we built it on a shoestring, I guess you'd say. There were things that really mattered to us, and we weren't going to compromise on those. And so we had triple glazed UPVC joinery for the home. It was important that we end up with a really functional kitchen. And it was important that we had a great heating system, that the house was warm. So we constructed the home with oversized 140mm LVL framing. And that gave us a well above code construction and the ability to insulate well on the walls. But it certainly wasn't a budget option. And so there were some things that were quite key that we had to spend good money on to get right. And then there are other things that didn't matter so much. Well, it didn't matter. It didn't matter in terms of what it looked like. It really mattered in terms of how it functioned. And so, for example, the roofing on this home was a line of colour steel roofing, modern roofing, but it was 5 years old. And it had already had holes in it from a previous use. It was taken off a warehouse. And so we were able to get enough roofing for this whole home at 1/10 of the cost of what it would have been to buy new. It was the wrong colour, and so I sprayed it black because we love the look of black with timber as an aesthetic. We couldn't afford to pay $30 a metre for Western red cedar, and so I found someone who had some trees for sale, and I bought some logs and had them milled and kiln dried and shaped and run into vertical shiplap weatherboard. And so here we have the Japanese cedar, durable as any. It's a lower grade, it has knots, it has blemishes, and so as a builder, as a carpenter, and loving that sort of craftsman type work, we were able to cut the boards where we needed to and cut out the big knots and create an aesthetic which is truly remarkable. And the main things that you see on this home when you first see it are the old second-hand roof and this timber that we got out of logs, where typically these main things would be a really expensive part of a construction. And so we were able to shrink this part of the budget to quite an extent, saving upwards of $50,000 even just in those two items. There were other things about the home. We found a second-hand set of stairs for $200 instead of paying $2,500 for a set of stairs. The old home that was on the property further up the hill was badly damaged in the earthquakes of 2010, and so it was demolished, and we stripped off the Western red cedar weatherboards that were on it. It was a well-built home, and I put those aside for a couple of years, and then I pulled them out of storage and ran them all through my thicknesser and laminated them together, and we made an amazing stairwell balustrade system that really is quite remarkable, and yet the weatherboards came for free. And it just took my time to repurpose them into something significant and something of a keepsake, I guess, a sort of an ode to the history of this property. And we sought to eliminate those cold corners with this home by doing that, by having open corners so that you have a solid piece of timber one way and a solid piece the other way, and then you're able to insulate on the inside. We eliminated it also by having no horizontal dwangs or nogs through the home, and you can only do that if you use laminated lumber framing, LVL, and that means that the timber is stronger, it's straighter, it runs from top to bottom, and you don't need horizontal dwangs. All the timber in the building creates a form of thermal bridging, and so you eliminate as much of that horizontal as you can. The next thing for us was to install UPVC joinery, and we don't tend to use aluminium joinery. There are options that will give you improved insulation, but we find UPVC or timber are the better options. And we set the joinery into the middle of the wall. So we don't plant it on the outside where the cold can run through from the outside. We set it into the middle, which is it's a modern form of construction. It is superhome construction, and it's just a move away from what was done conventionally. The joinery that we have, UPVC, is also triple glazed, and some would say that's an overkill, but we just find that it has a higher resistance value. There's less noise comes through from the outside. When you touch the window on the inside, you don't feel the outside temperature because you have two layers of resistance or air gap in the middle, giving it a high performance. The next thing on this home was that we installed a heat recovery ventilation system. It was just the basic system. It's called a Mitsubishi Losnay. It retrieves fresh air from the inside. It exchanges it with heat that's produced from the inside in the kitchen and shower areas, and it passes it by each other through a series of fins, and so it produces, or it retains, the warmth that you have created, but purifies it through a heat exchanger. And then beyond that, it was important to us to have a heating system that you could feel. And so we installed a warmth underfloor heating system, which is a dual system for efficiency. And so a hot water heat pump heats the water that goes into the hot water cylinder for our potable use for the taps and the appliances inside. That same water is circulated through the flooring system, so it is a dual system. It's maintained pure by one circulation every day, regardless of whether it's on or not. And efficiency-wise, well, a hot water heat pump is 3 times as efficient as a standard electric heat pump. And so this home, right now, we just started autumn. We have just turned on this underfloor heating just so that it is running at a low base level, and you barely see it register in terms of power consumption, but it's just starting to function. And so in the middle of winter, we have no other heating in the home, but you'll feel warm because your feet feel warm, and you can turn that up or down, and depending on what you want. The only other form of heating that we have is a heat pump up on the landing, purely for cooling. And so this home, in order to run some of the electrical appliances, we have PV solar on the roof, and so with 7 kilowatts of solar on the roof, it means that we generate from the sun as much as we need during the day. We don't contain it in batteries. We use what we can during the day through our appliances, and then we export back to the grid at a reasonable rate, which is actually the same cents per kilowatt as what we pay for night rate power. So when you think about how that functions, if you have excess or surplus solar during the day, you export it back to the grid at, I think, 17 cents a kilowatt. Then at night time, you use it to heat the hot water in the spa pool or the hot water cylinder or underfloor. You're taking it back from the grid then at 17 cents, and the equation is very good. So over the course of a year, now we have only been in here for almost 6 months now. By the time we get to November, we'll know what the total annual cost is for electricity. Right at this point in time, we have something like $250 of credit for sunlight hours that we've been using over the summer. And as we go into winter, we'll start to use that credit up, and there'll come a time when it'll cost us, but then we'll start getting credits again as the year goes on. The annual cost of electricity for this house is likely to be less than $500. It may well even be zero. We haven't tested it, and it'll just depend on how much power we need during the winter time. But that's what you call a high performance home. That's why you have a super home.